Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Chris here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at Universal Audio's console and how I find myself utilizing it in my current workflow. Let's go. So again, welcome back guys. So I just wanted to show off the Universal Audio console because it's a major part of my workflow when I'm creating music. I guess you'd look at it more from an engineering perspective because it's mainly dealing with the sound going into the computer and kind of processing it a bit on the way, as well as the sound coming out of the computer and how I can send it to myself or other people that I'm recording in the room. Got a couple of things set up to make my life a bit easier, but I just thought I'd break it down and show people how I utilize the software because it works so well with the hardware that, you know, it's very much a part of my process where I'm bouncing back and forth between Ableton, Logic, console, you know, depending what the day requires, you know, what we're recording, or if I'm just producing music on my own, you know, it all varies. So I just wanted to break it down and show it off because it really is a fascinating part of the process. So let's dive in. So to start this off, this is the console. Now, what is the console exactly? What's it doing? Why does it exist in the first place? Now, to fill you in, this is part of the Universal Audio system, I guess you could say. When you buy any of the interfaces, except the vaults, I believe, you'll get this software free of charge. It's included with it. Basically allows you to control the hardware, so I can change my input and stuff from the software, my volume of my monitors from the software, whatever. But the main thing is it allows me specifically to add plugins in the chain whilst I'm recording or just to listen to, but we'll dive a bit deeper into that. So this is the main page and currently how I've got it set up. So you can see here, the first channel is the Sphere. That's my Sphere microphone that lives in the back of the room right now. Next is the Reface CS, which is just a little synthesizer on the top. We've got an auxiliary for my itty bitty aux cable, always important to have. And next is the vinyl, which lives in here. We have these two channels specifically are virtual channels, so they're not physical inputs on the hardware, but they're kind of digital inputs in the software, which allow me to, any sound coming out of my computer, I can have it come up on this fader. Again, for setting up headphone sends and stuff like that, it's very convenient to just have something come up on its own fader and you know where it lives, and that's great. And then I have the second virtual channel, which is set up to be my DAW output. This I've kind of configured in the individual DAW, so it's always just coming out of there. And again, that just allows me to send it over here on my auxiliaries to either headphones or effects I've got running out of the software. But yeah, so there's that. And then lastly on the chain is just these two inputs from my twin, one of which is the microphone I'm using now, and the second I've got on my amplifier. I've actually got two mics on the amp, so I just end up swapping out one of the cables, which is fine. So that's what I've got plugged in. Just to kind of add, I'm also running a Patchbay here, which is a bit of a recent addition, which allows me to this Reface channel. I've got the micro Korg patched underneath it, so if I pull out two cables on the same channel, I've got a different synth, which is fantastic. So as you can see, I've got all my channels lined up, and you can kind of look at it like a mixing desk where the preamp is at the top, you've got your filter, your phantom power, all of the utility kind of things at the top, and then your inserts where you insert your plugins, and then lastly followed by your sends, where if I wanted to send to my headphones or to certain effects, I can do that all from there. As well as a final stage of monitoring, you could say, because I can also change the volume from here. Now this isn't actually changing the volume of what you're hearing because that's coming out separately. And then it just allows me to pan and mute, and I've got all my controls from there. Moving on to the other side of the console, we've got the auxiliary sends. These are two sends that you get on every channel right there, 1 and 2. And that just allows you to send what's coming in on an input to a separate space. In this case, this auxiliary 1 and 2, where on 1 I've got a reverb. If I unmuted this and sent my voice to this reverb, you would hear it get very soaked in reverb. And that's fine. I've got that if I'm recording a vocalist and I quickly just need a little bit of reverb to send them, I can just go into the sends, give them a little bit of reverb, and that's great. Got that reverb. And then I would either go into the DAW and add the same plugin, which is just this EMT 140 over here, which is great because I can just go in. There's a copy setting when you click on these three dots, so I can just copy the preset I'm using on that plugin, paste it into the plugin on the DAW, and everything's the same. Fantastic. So how I look at this layout is that I want everything to kind of be ready at all times. So the vinyl is just always on. It's usually muted because there's a little bit of hum, but that's great because if I'm listening to a vinyl and there's a bit I really like or I want the sample, I could just, instantly have access to it. I click on the channel and boom, I can record. A really unique feature that I find from this console is that obviously you have your inserts where you can insert any of the Universal Audio plugins as long as you own them. But the beauty is you see that you've got this red dot or this blue dot, depending which one you could select it. You can also change it here. Boom, that will just change all of them at once. You can hear it change my microphone because what that is doing is basically when it's on red, if the sound is passing through the plugins, it's going to physically record that sound to your recording. So in this case, you can see I've got a bit of compression on my voice, and you can see I've also got this SSL channel doing a little bit of extra compression, slight dip in the EQ, nothing too crazy. But basically what this means is when it's on red, those sounds are being recorded, whereas when it's on blue, I'll be hearing it, but the processing is now off, so you're not hearing any of that compression or that EQ. Just leave that on. And as well, a beautiful part about this system is the fact that they have these Unison Pre's. Now, what is a Unison Pre? What makes it different to a regular pre? Normally on your interface, you've got the preamp built into the interface, and you just turn up the gain depending how much you need, as so. But the beauty of this is the Unison Pre allows you to use again some of their plugins, their software, but in a slightly different way, because depending which preamp you pick, so in this case I'm using the Neve 1073 on my voice, and what's nice is that if I had to change this to say an API or something, it's actually going to change the impedance on the interface to match what the actual hardware will do. So that will give you an even closer match to what the physical hardware will do in real life. You're not just kind of sticking an emulation on the channel, but you're physically changing how the sound is recorded depending on which plugin you choose. So in this case, I've got on my Reface an API because it sounds a bit cleaner. I have a lot more control if I need to filter or EQ or whatever. And then on my main vocal mic, which I'm using the Sphere, I've got just again another Neve, not doing much at all, just a bit of gain, but at least it's giving me that slight coloration of the Neve, which is fantastic. So just to run through a little bit of processing that I find myself doing. Obviously in the case of the Sphere microphone, you've got the preamp. That's usually the first stage of processing, is just going through that Neve 1073, adding that slight bit of color. Then obviously we go into the Sphere microphone. That's great. I've got all of these mics to pick from if I, have a different singer that I want to use and I want to try something different, or I just want to be a bit more creative without necessarily having to unplug and plug in again. So that's fantastic. And then lastly, after that, I have this CL1B, which gets used more or less. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends if I'm battling with the compression and I want to save that for when I'm actually mixing. So I might just leave it off. If I want to make the singer feel a lot more confident in their performance, I add a bit of compression. It brings everything together and smooths everything out. So that's always nice to have. But if I'm battling with it, I'll just leave it off and then add some afterwards. Again, another really nice feature about this is the fact that we have all of these inserts, but what this means is I can go in here and I can actually create chains of presets. So I've been spending the last couple of years just adding loads of presets from, different things I've tried. And one thing I find myself using a lot is these just different preamps for the guitar mics. I've made a couple of condensers and a couple of dynamics, because normally this first channel up here is my dynamic microphone, the second one is the condenser. So I can just go in, I'll do it on the condenser channel and add a number 1, which is literally just a Neve preamp. The second one is probably an API, and the third one is something old school, V76. So like this, I can quickly go in and I don't need to necessarily stay looking for plugins. I can just pick, condenser 1, condenser 2. It's even a bit random. I don't necessarily know what I'm picking, so on the spot I can just be like, that sounds great, and just move on. So how you're looking at this now is usually when I'm dealing with audio, either going in through a microphone or going in through cables like on my synth. But say I was plugging a guitar into the front of this because there's a little high Z input. I've also made I'll do it on this channel. I've also made a couple of guitar templates which are using the plugins built in again. So I could go on this guitar delay, slap that in. I've got a Fender Tweed on the Unison Pre, followed by the Korg STD 3000, and then this obviously a tuner. You gotta have a tuner at the end of every guitar chain because you'll probably be tuning quite a bit. So that's great to have. And then I just made this preset blank, clears everything, very nice. So I quickly want to break down the sends or the cues because again, this is a very important part of my process. Now, most of the time when people come into the studio and say I'm recording a vocalist, they'll just get the same mix I'm getting because most of the time that's a good match and it works out. So I've got 2 feeds set up. I've got one where I can just plug the headphones directly into any of the interfaces and it will just give me a mix of what I'm hearing. So currently how I've got the cues set up is that Q1, this actually does nothing, it's not rooted. Basically it's sending a mix of everything, just balanced as it is on these faders, but it's sending a mix to the headphones on the front of this interface, the front of that interface. That interface is also connected to a little headphone preamp, which just gives me 4 more slots for headphones, which is great. And it also gives me a lot more gain, which is really good for these headphones in particular because they can be a bit quiet. So next on Q2, I'm just sending out of this interface a single channel to go into my recorder, and that just records my voice separately to the music that I'm working on, which allows me to mix it after the fact, which is great. Q3 then is my music send that's also going to the recorder. So I've got a stereo DI box plugged in and then a single channel for the microphone on its own, which is sick. So I've got those 2 separate controls that can be sent out separately, which is really great for, filming these videos. And then lastly, Q4, which right now is also not assigned to anything. I'm either using it if someone needs like a more kind of individual mix on their headphones. If I was recording a singer and they needed more of themselves, less of the music, and I didn't want to stay kind of playing with what I was hearing, I could just give them a completely separate feed, which is sick. Or I could go into my Q outputs here and I can actually link this to a specific output on my interface, and that would be a method I would use if I was, say, sending to an effects pedal. And then like that, I could just put on a send and say, okay, I need this much sending to a delay or whatever it may be. So that allows me to do that. And it gives me a lot of freedom to expand and change it how I need. And that's kind of the majority of what you're seeing here. There are the occasional times I'll chuck a preamp on the vinyl to just give it a little bit more warmth, but I just wanted to show you quickly this IO matrix because again, the super convenient part of this whole system is the fact that you can change the IO of your hardware. So when you open up Logic or Ableton, it can come up in a certain manner. So I've set it up that first on the chain, first 2 inputs are these, which is good because those are normally the first things I'm plugging in, since the back is kind of unreachable by this point. Next are the 8 channels of the Apollo 8P, which gives me those 8 extra channels. And then lastly, these 4 channels right here of my virtual inputs. So when I mentioned that if I'm playing music from my laptop, it comes up on this fader, I can actually record that back into Ableton. Say it was a YouTube video that I'm looking for a sample or whatever, or a song that I've been sent and I'm just playing in the background. I can go in and I can sample that. Or I can kind of re-sample my DAW, which is good because as long as I'm not monitoring, because then you can get a pretty horrible feedback loop, but it allows me to kind of take everything that's coming out of the DAW and I can record it back in on a single channel to reprocess it further. So that's fantastic. On the right side of this, I've just got my outputs, simple as monitor left and right. These 2 I'm technically using for my second speaker as an alternative. It's only using the one, but it's knocked out both of them. Oh, it's getting a bit dark. There we go, forgot that light. Yeah, so lastly, we've got these virtual channels, which allows me to pick where I would like to send the DAW audio or the laptop audio. That can be assigned from there. And then the Q sends. This is just another manual way that if I wanted to send to a specific output on the front or the backs of the interface, I can do that directly because I know where the channel is that it's sending to. Fantastic. So that's about it for the console today. I just quickly want to show you my favorite part about having this Patchbay incorporated is the fact that, I'd have to stay going behind synths or the desk just to unplug, plug back in. So it's really good to have all of these inputs and outputs kind of pre-plugged. So then I can go in and I can change stuff on the spot. So in this case, I've kind of mapped my keyboard here that I've got a reface preset and a microKORG preset, so I can click on the microKORG. So there's that. I can click on the reface, unplug one of these cables, whoop, and you can hear one side and then there's the other side. And yeah, that's basically my breakdown today of the console. You know, I'm always trying to find different ways to utilize this. It's a great piece of software, and technically allows me to use the hardware without even touching the hardware. I can control my volume from here if I want. I don't even know if you can see this, but yeah, it's great. It's a lovely little tool. I would recommend it. Obviously comes in at a certain price point, which might not be available to everyone. It's great gear nonetheless, and I would recommend it. But stay tuned for another video coming up where I'm going to be breaking down basically the whole studio setup. This was just the console because I really love that aspect of the software, but I'll be breaking down kind of what I've got running here and how I make my videos, so stay tuned for that. And thanks again for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, please feel free to leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. I really appreciate the feedback, and feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Once again, I've been Vella, and I'll see you on the next one.